A U.S. federal court has just struck down the Trump administration's emergency tariffs on automobiles and auto parts, halting a move that threatened global supply chains and risked a trade war. The decision challenges the broad use of national security as a justification for trade barriers, a hallmark of Trump-era policy. This isn't just about cars, it's a pivotal test of the limits of presidential power over international commerce. The court's ruling pushes back against years of executive overreach, questioning whether economic competition from allies truly constitutes a national security emergency. The issue now returns to Congress and the White House, setting the stage for a new debate over America's role in global trade. The legal fight at the heart of this story revolved around the Trump administration's controversial threat to impose sweeping tariffs on cars and auto parts. These tariffs were to be enacted under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, a law that, while on the books for decades, had rarely been used in such a broad and consequential way. The move sent shockwaves through the global auto industry and raised fundamental questions about the reach of presidential power in matters of trade and national security. Section 232 is a seldom invoked provision that grants the president the authority to impose tariffs or other trade restrictions if the Department of Commerce determines that certain imports threaten to impair national security. The law was originally intended as a safeguard during times of crisis, but its broad language leaves much to interpretation, giving the executive branch significant discretion. In 2019, after months of investigation, the Commerce Department concluded that the volume of imported autos and auto parts did, in fact, pose a threat to America's national security. This finding opened the door for the administration to propose tariffs as high as 25% on foreign-made vehicles and components, a move that would have dramatically reshaped the auto market. The administration's argument was that a robust domestic auto industry was essential not just for economic reasons, but for national defense. They claimed that relying too heavily on foreign cars and parts could leave the U.S. vulnerable in times of conflict. The threat of these tariffs became a powerful bargaining chip in trade negotiations with key partners like the European Union and Japan, as the U.S. sought to extract concessions and rebalance trade relationships. Unlike the earlier tariffs on steel and aluminum, which targeted a narrower range of products and countries, the proposed auto tariffs would have affected nearly every major auto-producing nation in the world. This included close U.S. allies such as Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Canada, raising concerns about the potential for a global trade war and retaliation against American exports. Even before any tariffs were actually imposed, the mere threat of such sweeping measures created years of uncertainty for automakers, suppliers, and workers. Investment decisions were put on hold, expansion plans were shelved, and the entire industry was left in a state of limbo, unsure of what the future might hold. This prolonged ambiguity, combined with doubts about whether auto imports truly constituted a national emergency, led to a wave of legal challenges. Industry groups, foreign governments, and legal experts questioned the administration's interpretation of Section 232 and the evidence supporting its claims. Ultimately, the court's decision in this case has forced a national conversation about the true limits of presidential authority over trade. It has set a precedent that could shape how future administrations wield these powerful tools, and how the balance between economic policy and national security is defined in American law. The administration's case hinged on a broad reading of national security in Section 232. Instead of a direct military threat, they argued that economic decline in the auto sector would erode America's technological edge and defense capabilities. This was a major departure from past uses of the law, which focused on materials essential for defense. Critics saw this as a pretext for protectionism, especially since most auto imports came from allies, not adversaries. Even US-based automakers opposed the tariffs, warning of higher costs and disrupted supply chains. The administration insisted the president deserved wide latitude, but the courts and industry pushed back. The debate exposed the risks of conflating economic competition with national security. The Court of International Trade decisively rejected the administration's use of Section 232 for auto tariffs. The judges ruled that the government failed to show a credible link between auto imports and a real national security threat. While the executive deserves deference, the court said, the deference isn't unlimited. The ruling emphasized that national security can't be stretched to cover any economic challenge from allies. The court also criticized the years-long delay and use of tariff threats as a negotiating tactic, calling it an abuse of emergency powers. This decision reasserts the court's role as a check on executive power and returns broad trade policymaking to Congress. If enacted, the proposed auto tariffs would have sent shockwaves through both the U.S. and global economies, disrupting the delicate balance of international trade. The mere announcement of such sweeping tariffs sent ripples of uncertainty through financial markets, as investors and businesses braced for the potential fallout. A 25% tariff on vehicles and auto parts would have instantly raised the price of new cars by thousands of dollars, making them unaffordable for many American families. This sharp increase would have slashed car sales nationwide, forcing dealerships to cut staff and reduce inventory. The impact would have rippled outward, threatening millions of jobs not just in manufacturing, but also in supply chains, logistics, and retail sectors that depend on a healthy auto industry. U.S. automakers would have faced soaring production costs, making their vehicles less competitive both at home and in international markets. As American cars became more expensive, foreign competitors would have gained an edge, further eroding the market share of U.S. brands and putting additional pressure on domestic factories. Retaliation from major trading partners like the EU, Japan, and South Korea was all but certain. These countries were prepared to target iconic U.S. exports such as soybeans, bourbon, and motorcycles, threatening the livelihoods of American farmers and factory workers far beyond the auto sector. The resulting trade war would have escalated tensions and deepened economic pain on both sides. The tariffs would have discouraged foreign investment, as global companies like Toyota and BMW reconsidered their U.S. operations. Plans for new factories and expansions would have been shelved, and existing facilities might have faced closure, leading to further job losses and economic decline in communities that rely on these employers. The result would have been a cascade of layoffs, higher prices for everyday goods, and a significant blow to America's reputation as a stable and welcoming place to do business. The uncertainty would have affected not just the auto industry, but also small businesses and families across the country. Fortunately, the court's intervention prevented a crisis that would have hurt workers and families far beyond the auto industry, safeguarding jobs and restoring some measure of confidence to the business community. Yet, the threat alone had already cast a long shadow over investment and hiring, as companies hesitated to expand or bring on new workers. The episode served as a stark reminder of how quickly policy decisions can put entire industries and millions of livelihoods on the brink. The economic fallout from auto tariffs would have hit hardest in the Midwest and the South, America's auto heartlands. States like Michigan and Ohio, along with southern auto alley states such as Alabama and South Carolina, would have faced soaring costs and job losses. Foreign-owned plants in these regions, like BMW's in South Carolina, rely on imported parts and would have been especially vulnerable. Ports in Baltimore, Los Angeles, and Charleston would have seen sharp declines in business, rippling through logistics and transportation. Retaliatory tariffs would have slammed agricultural states, compounding the pain for farmers already hit by previous trade disputes. The result would have been a patchwork of economic distress across the country. From factory towns to farm communities, the court's ruling averted a nationwide crisis. The auto tariffs threatened to upend America's alliances and the global trading system, targeting allies like Germany, Japan, and South Korea on national security grounds risked a full-blown trade war and undermined decades of cooperation. The EU and others had prepared swift retaliation, escalating tensions and threatening the World Trade Organization's credibility. The move would have weakened U.S. alliances in Europe and Asia, just as global security challenges were mounting. China stood to benefit from the discord, positioning itself as a more reliable trade partner. Instead of isolating rivals, the U.S. risked isolating itself. The court's decision has, for now, preserved critical alliances and averted a self-inflicted strategic wound. The court's ruling sets a powerful precedent, one that will echo through the halls of government and the offices of business leaders for years to come. This decision is not just a legal milestone, it's a signal that the judiciary is willing to step in and define the boundaries of presidential power, especially when it comes to matters as consequential as trade and national security. By raising the bar for future presidents who want to use national security as a pretext for tariffs, the court has made it clear that such justifications must be genuine, well-documented, and subject to scrutiny. No longer can sweeping trade actions be taken on vague or unsubstantiated grounds. It signals a return to more traditional trade policy, where the roles of each branch of government are respected and the process is more transparent. Now, congressional involvement and clearer justification are required, ensuring that trade policy is debated openly and not decided behind closed doors. The decision energizes efforts in Congress to reclaim authority over Trade and Reform Section 232, the law that has been at the center of recent tariff controversies. Lawmakers are now more motivated to clarify the limits of executive power and restore a balance that reflects the Constitution's intent. For businesses, the ruling brings relief and greater certainty, allowing them to plan for the future, without the constant fear of sudden, unpredictable tariffs disrupting their operations. With the threat that had chilled investment and hiring now lifted, companies can focus on growth, innovation, and expanding their workforce, knowing that the rules of the game are less likely to change overnight. It may also spark more legal challenges to executive trade actions, as businesses and advocacy groups see that the courts are willing to listen and act when executive authority is stretched too far. The courts are becoming a new battleground for trade policy, where the limits of presidential power will be tested and defined case by case. The decision reassures U.S. allies that American institutions can check abrupt policy shifts, strengthening trust and stability in international relationships. Allies can now have greater confidence that agreements made with the U.S. will be honored and not upended by unilateral executive action. While trade disputes will continue, the ruling restores faith in the rule of law and demonstrates that the U.S. remains committed to fair, predictable, and principled trade practices. America's reliability as a trading partner is reinforced, encouraging more robust trade and investment from around the world. The balance of power in U.S. trade policy has shifted, at least for now. This moment marks a renewed commitment to checks and balances, and a reminder that in American democracy, no single branch holds all the cards. The court's decision to block the auto tariffs is a turning point for U.S. trade policy. It reaffirms that presidential power, even under the banner of national security, has limits and must be grounded in fact. The ruling has averted economic and diplomatic chaos, preserved alliances, and set a crucial legal precedent. The debate over how America should compete globally now returns to Congress and the public. The pressures for protectionism remain, but so does the need for democratic accountability. As the U.S. navigates a complex global economy, the challenge is clear balance executive flexibility with the checks and balances that define American democracy. The future of U.S. trade policy will be shaped not just by presidents, but by the enduring strength of its institutions.